Hey everybody, Nick Espinoza, your chief security fanatic here, and it is Sunday, so we are doing breaches of the week. And this week, no different than the last, so much stuff going on. But as always, I want to thank the people that sent me this information. It always helps me out, and that would be John Jackson, Kevin Burns, any relation to Ken, and Ron Sanderson. So thank you very much, and we've got a ton of big ones for you. But I want to dive in first with our mini segment. And if you're not familiar with our mini segment, if you're not a longtime listener or follower, it simply is this: if you just paid for cybersecurity, you wouldn't be getting data breached, you wouldn't be losing your reputation. And with that, let's start with the big one. AT&T. Now, they have agreed to pay $13 million to resolve an investigation over their data breach of one of their cloud vendors in January of last year that impacted 8.9 million AT&T wireless customers. And that's according to the FCC, or Federal Communications Commission, this past Tuesday. Now, the FCC said that the fine will resolve its investigation over whether AT&T had failed to protect the information of its customers, and added that AT&T has agreed to boost its data governance practices to increase supply chain integrity in the handling of sensitive data to protect consumers, basically from similar vendor data breaches in the future. Now, again, if you're a longtime listener and follower of mine, you know that like half of what I talk about here, roughly like 40 to 60%, is supply chain breaches. I didn't get hit, but I outsourced and I moved my data to somewhere, and here we are. Now, the FCC also said the data exposed in 2023 covered customers between 2015 through 2017 that should have been deleted in 2017 or 18. So heads up to you, if you've been a longtime AT&T customer from that time period, you may be entitled to compensation. Moving on. Let's head over to the United Kingdom and talk about Capita. This is the outsourcing firm, because almost 8,000 claimants are basically making up a high court case against Capita following their 2023 cyber attack. Now, the Manchester-based Barings Law, who apparently is running the show there, has slammed the outsourcing giant for its handling of the breach, which occurred in March of last year and was claimed by the Black Basta ransomware group. Barings Law head of data breach Adnan Malik said that this is the largest action against the outsourcing giant, and rather, this is an outsourcing giant, the largest one in the world that they've ever had, which the firm filed in high court earlier this year. So obviously that's a huge thing. So if you're listening to me or watching me in the UK and you have anything to do with Capita, you also may be getting some pounds. Moving on, let's talk about Cafe Press. If you remember them, and I've talked about them off and on over the years because it's been a mess for probably 5 years? Maybe a little less. Now, the Federal Trade Commission is sending payments totaling more than $370,000 to customers who were harmed by the data security failures of that merchandising platform online, Cafe Press. The payments stem from a March 2022 settlement, again, years, that resolved FTC allegations that Cafe Press failed to implement reasonable security controls, in addition to storing social security numbers and password reset answers in plain text, meaning anybody could read it. Cafe Press retained that data longer than obviously was necessary. And so there you go. If you were affected by Cafe Press like half a decade ago, you're about to get paid. Moving on, and that, for the record, ends our mini segment. And if any of them, AT&T on down to Cafe Press, had just paid for cybersecurity, they wouldn't have their reputations ruined. They definitely wouldn't be talking about them, and they wouldn't be paying money. With that, let's move on to the later breaches, and this would be Providence, Rhode Island schools. Now, in a statement issued this past Thursday, their school board described their executive session as, quote, regarding the recent breach of the district's network. Now, the reason why they had to describe it was because they got hit so hard they couldn't actually live stream the board meetings like they normally do. Now, this meeting included a presentation from the Rhode Island Department of Education, known as RIDE, R-I-D-E, that's kind of cool, and the Providence Public School Department, or PPSD, quote, while I cannot disclose the specific contents of our discussion, I can state that the district is awaiting an analysis of this breach to learn more about its severity and the degree to which any information was exposed. While we await the results of that analysis, PPSD continues to mobilize every resource available to ensure that learning proceeds with as little disruption as possible. So heads up to you, if you're in Providence, Rhode Island, and you got kids in school or you work for the school district, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about David's Bridal. On September 13th, they filed with Maine after discovering that certain information in their possession was subject to unauthorized access. David Bridles explained that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party being able to access consumer-sensitive information, including names and social security numbers, so odds are employees. Now, upon completing the investigation, David Bridle began sending out breach notification letters to those affected. So if you've bought a bridal dress, a wedding dress, that's what it's called, or a bridesmaid's dress, that's probably what I was confusing in my head, or work for them, you might want to check in. Moving on, let's talk about Aramark. This is the giant in terms of food for corporations. On September 10th, they filed with Massachusetts after discovering that attackers were able to obtain confidential employee information in their possession. And of course, we're talking about deposit details, names, address, social security numbers, and more. Aramark is sending out notifications to their employees, so heads up if you're employed by them. Moving on. Let's talk about the Stillwater Mining Company. They told regulators this past Saturday that attackers breached company systems in the middle of June, but the incident was only discovered on July 8th. It took more than a month for investigators to realize that the personal information of 7,258 employees were stolen, and in addition to names and contact information, the attackers were able to gain access and steal government ID information, passport numbers, social security numbers, tax ID numbers, birth certificates, financial information like bank account numbers, and medical information like health plan numbers. The investigation is ongoing, and the mining company said it was able to confirm that the breach was on August 19th. They own platinum mines, and so heads up to you, if you get your platinum from Stillwater Mining Company, they may be having issues right now. Moving on, let's talk about Indonesia. Like the whole country of Indonesia, because their tax agency is investigating an alleged data breach that exposed the taxpayer identification numbers of millions of Indonesians, including their president, Joko Widodo, who goes by Jokowi. Now, his ministers were also hit, his two sons were hit, and on and on and on, according to a government official. A series of cyber attacks have hit Indonesian companies and government agencies in the past few years, which experts attribute to the government's lax protection on personal data. Indonesia also happens to have one of the largest populations in the world, and so by virtue of that, they are going to be a large target no matter what. So heads up to you if you're Indonesian, wherever you are, and you pay taxes or you're in their databases. Moving on, let's talk about Fireworks Software. They filed with Maine after discovering an unauthorized party was able to access parts of their computer network. Now, in this notice, they explain that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party gaining essentially sensitive information. Now, specifically, Fireworks Software noted that the incident affected data that was provided to the company by Rowan College at Burlington County. Now, upon completing their investigation, Fireworks Software is sending out notices as well. So obviously another supply chain breach. Rowan College in Burlington County, heads up. Or if you just use Fireworks Software, you may be affected as well. Moving on. Let's head on over to India and talk about their largest insurer, Star Health. Now, stolen customer data, including medical reports from India's biggest health insurer, Star Health, is publicly available via chatbots on Telegram just weeks after Telegram's founder was accused of allowing the messenger app to essentially facilitate this crime. Now, the purported creator of the chatbots told a security researcher who alerted Reuters, where I'm getting this information, essentially to this issue, and that private details of millions of people were for sale, and that essentially samples could be viewed by asking chatbots to essentially tell you. Now, Star Health and Allied Insurance, again in India, basically their market capitalization exceeds $4 billion US, and in a statement of Reuters said that it had reported alleged unauthorized data access to Indian authorities. It said the initial assessment showed, quote, no widespread compromise and that sensitive customer data remained secure, end quote. So we'll see what happens there. But India being the first or second largest, they're always trading places with China, countries in the world, this could be a massive, massive data breach as they have over 1 billion citizens. So obviously a huge thing. I'll keep an eye on that. Moving on. Let's head on back to the United States and talk about Dell computers, because, dude, if you work for them, you got some issues. Dell has confirmed to a Bleeping Computer that they are investigating recent claims that they suffered a data breach after a threat actor leaked data for over 10,000 employees. Now, the allegations were published yesterday, or actually about 2 days ago or so, by a threat actor named Grep, who alleges that the computing vendor suffered a quote-unquote minor data breach in September of this year, exposing internal employee and partner information. In the post on a hacking forum, the threat actors said that the stolen data includes employees' unique identifiers, full names of employees for Dell, and partners' status of employees if they're active or not, and internal identification strings. So heads up to you if you work for Dell or you're a partner, dude, you're having a bad week. Moving on, Johnson & Wales University on September 19th, they filed with Maine after discovering an unauthorized party accessed their infrastructure as well. Now, in this notice, JWU explained that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party gaining sensitive information. We're talking names, social security, and financial account information. And upon completing their investigation, they are sending out notices as well. So Johnson & Wales University faculty and staff and students, heads up. Moving on, let's talk about Altman Plants, or specifically Altman Specialty Plants. On September 18th, they filed with Texas after discovering that an unauthorized party accessed certain files on their infrastructure. And again, we're talking names, social security numbers, financial account information, driver's license, dates of birth, passport, health insurance information, and medical information. Upon completing its investigation, Altman is sending out letters as well. Given that, there is essentially, looks like an employee hit, possibly customer hit. And what's interesting about Texas data breach laws is that you don't have to declare to Texas unless you have more than 250 Texans exposed in a breach. So Altman obviously has more than 250 Texans that are caught up in this. So good luck to you, Lone Star State. Moving on, let's talk about Wells Fargo, specifically their clearing services. So Wells Fargo Clearing Services, aka First Clearing, filed a notice with Massachusetts after discovering somebody in their network that shouldn't have been. And it's the normal stuff you'd think of: names, social security numbers, brokerage account numbers, and more. Clearing Services, aka Wells Fargo Clearing Services, began sending out data breach notifications as well. Moving on, Express Services filed with Texas. Again, just told you about Texas's laws. After discovering an unauthorized actor gained access to two of their email accounts, Express explained sensitive information was hit: names, social security numbers, driver's license numbers, financial information, medical information, health insurance information, and on and on and on. They are sending out notices also. Moving on, Steward Partners Management on September 18th, they filed with Massachusetts after an unauthorized person, yada, 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 into their network, sensitive information, but I do not have a list on what that sensitive information is. So obviously not good, but heads up if you use Steward Partners Management for all your management needs or managing your partners, whichever it is. Moving on, Atrium Health on September 13th, the Charlotte Mecklenburg Hospital Authority, aka Atrium Health, posted a website notice confirming reports of an Atrium Health data breach after discovering an unauthorized party basically got into email thanks to a phishing attack. So this is why you train your people. In this notice, Atrium Health explained that the incident resulted in an unauthorized party being able to access sensitive information, and you know where this is going: name, social security, driver's license, financial accounts, medical information, health insurance information, digital signatures, dates of birth, addresses, email addresses. If you've ever sneezed or looked at or driven by an Atrium Health, you're probably caught up in this. Upon completing their investigation, they are sending out letters also. Never a good thing. And with that, we have our finally. We didn't have as much breaches this week, and I went looking, but I think this is actually an interesting one because this is the aftermath of just how damaging a breach can be. Now, when I've essentially talk in my mini segment about losing reputation, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Data breaches, if you go through it as an organization, can cost you time, can cost you money, can cost you customers, and that's exactly what happened to Slack because Disney is up. And let's talk about this because the Walt Disney Company will no longer use Slack for their in-house communications months after basically that they had a hack that involved more than a terabyte of company data being leaked to the public via Slack. Walt Disney, for the record, is the largest employer in the state of Florida, one of the major employers in California and all over the world. So this is a huge, huge company and probably one of the most, if not the most, arguably iconic brand that the U.S. has offered the planet. Now, the company has already begun to transition to a new internal, quote, streamlined enterprise-wide collaboration tools, but they've officially notified employees and cast members this past Thursday that most of its business units would move away from Slack usage by the end of Disney's next fiscal quarter. And that's according to basically a memo from their CFO, Hugh Johnston, that was obtained by CNBC, where I'm getting this information. Now, Disney told investors in August that the summer data hack, which included a range of financial information, computer codes, and details about unreleased projects, was not expected to have a material impact on the company's operations or financial performance. But obviously, that's a huge bill Slack can no longer send, right? So representatives from Disney and Salesforce, because Salesforce owns Slack, did not respond to CNBC when they reached out for comment. Quote, "Our security is rock solid." That's according to Mark Benioff, the CEO of Salesforce, during an interview with Bloomberg at the company's annual Dreamforce conference this week. Quote, "Companies also have to take the right measure to prevent phishing attacks and to lock down their employees' social engineering. So we can do our part, but our customers also have to do their part as well." Now, Mr. Benioff is correct in the sense that it is a shared responsibility. In the same way I see companies spin up, cloud platforms like Amazon's AWS or Microsoft's Azure/Entra, et cetera, and the Microsofts and Amazons of the world give you an absolute ton of tools to defend yourself, to lock things down, and if you're not using them, that's a problem. Did you actually enable multi-factor authentication or integrate it with identity management, Disney? That is part of this, right? But the other side is, Slack has to basically keep up on these things and ensure that they've got minimum standards, like enforcing MFA right out of the gate. That's something that Microsoft is doing. And I think these large cloud platform providers can no longer get away with simply saying, here's a username and login. They're not Facebook. And Facebook is designed to make it as easy as possible to sign up. Security is always an afterthought, besides they're data mining you anyway. But if you go digging, you can find MFA for Facebook like you can for other platforms. But again, Slack being a primarily business collaborative platform, these are things that should be enforced right out of the gate, no exception. Now, Salesforce CEO Benioff also noted that Disney continues to use Salesforce products in other aspects, basically including through its Disney Store, Disney Guides, sales and service operations, its call centers, et cetera, et cetera. So while they're losing Slack, and again, that's a big bill that Salesforce cannot send out anymore, Slack can't send out anymore, they've still got them in a whole bunch of other ways. So again, large corporations gonna corporate largely. So here we are. I think this was an interesting week, but again, this is why essentially, especially if you're a business, I don't care if you're small or huge, you need good security, because if you lose one of your largest customers, aka Disney, one of the largest companies on the planet, that's never good for the bottom line. And as much as Mark Benioff, CEO of Salesforce, is upbeat about it, et cetera, they're kicking it because that's a ton of money that they just lost. And so there you go. Those were your breaches of the week. Were you affected? Let me know. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP. And please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please attempt to stay private. Thanks, everybody.